Hi, everybody. Eve Harrow on Rejuvenation for the Land of Israel Network. Some of you may remember that a few months ago I interviewed Ashley Perry Perez on Danusim, on the Jews who were at some point forcibly converted under the Inquisition. It was a long time period, to Christianity. And now we've got quite a few, hundreds of thousands, if not more, around the world, mainly southern United States, Central America, and South America, the former Spanish Empire, who are rediscovering their Jewish roots, doing with them whatever they want to do with them. But it's a fascinating discussion. So I was reading Segula magazine a couple of weeks ago. Some of you may remember that a couple of years ago I interviewed the editor, Sarah Jo Ben-Zvi. It's a great magazine. And I come across an article by an old friend, Dr. Ari Greenspan, along with Dr. Ari Zivotofsky, his partner in arms, about a similar but a little bit different situation that's going on in Africa and in other parts of the world. So first of all, Ari, thanks so much for joining me today on the Land of Israel Network.
Pleasure. Happy to be here.
Okay, so the tribes, different kinds of tribes. Some of them have Kohanic genes. Like, what's going on in Africa? Is it like an in thing now to try and find a connection to the Jewish people?
Right. So I've given them a name. We call them shadow Jews. There's something going on. It's just below the radar, totally below the radar. But you have maybe even millions of people, but certainly hundreds of thousands of people that are moving from Christianity towards Judaism. Will they get to Judaism? Do they want to ultimately be Jews? That's a separate question. So let's talk about a few specific groups of people and tribes, and we can sort of distinguish between different types of groups. Groups that actually claim Jewish descent, whether they really are or not is another question. Groups that have no Jewish descent but have accepted Judaism, and a whole, how do you say retzef in English? A continuum of people on this journey, and it's really all over the world. It's happening in South America, all over Africa. We'll talk about a bunch of countries in Africa, in Papua New Guinea, in India, in Madagascar. It's happening everywhere. So let's take two groups or three groups as test cases. So you have the Ethiopian Jews. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the Ethiopian Jews claim to be descended from Solomon and Sheba,
or from the tribe of Dan. No.
Some say the tribe of Dan, so right. So there was a 17th century chief rabbi of Egypt who mentions that they were from the tribe of Dan. It's an interesting story, actually. He was asked by one of the people in his community the following. He says, "I bought a slave girl in the slave market, and now I find out that she's Jewish. She's a black Jew. What should I do?" So the rabbi said, "What do you mean, what should you do? There's a commandment to release captives who are Jewish. Of course you have to release her." So anyway, that's how we know some people said they're from the tribe of Dan. In any event, they definitely have Jewish roots, and they were Jewish all their generations. They probably separated from the Jewish people right after the destruction of the first temple. So we're talking 700 years before the Common Era. So they never had what are oral law. So there are many things that they never did because they never knew about. For example, the holiday of Hanukkah, which takes place 185 BCE, something like this. 164, okay, whatever it is, and as a result, like they never had that holiday because they separated from us. But Jewish 100%.
Okay, so I've got a question here just for some clarity. So there are people in the world who say that they come from the tribes of Israel, right? Even some people that say in Afghanistan, some of the Pashtun, I remember, they say they're Bani Ephraim and Bani Yosef, but they're not Jews. Right. So they come from the ancient tribes. So you and I, who live as Jews today, think of it as one continuum. We come from the tribes. We speak about Jacob and our forefathers, and we live like just out of Hebron, both of us. Amazing. And so we're Jews today. But there's all kinds of breakaways going on, and also people coming in. Because to be considered Jewish today, you're either born for a Jewish mom or you convert into Judaism. So we've got that as well. So this Jewish and tribal thing, how's that going on?
Okay, so that's what I'm telling you. So the first test case, is a case of the Ethiopian Jews, which are Jewish, yet controversy, yes, maybe no. Okay. Near Ethiopia is the country of Uganda. And in Uganda, there's an amazing tribe called the Abu Yadaya. So I visited them 3 times now, the Abu Yadaya. What's their story? In 1919, there was this general. He was a king, he was a general. Until today, he's a well-known figure in modern Ugandan history, and he actually conquered Uganda for the British, basically. And he was unhappy with his name is Kakangulu. Okay, there's a picture of his nephew right over there. Okay, a black and white picture from the 1960s. And Kakangulu was he had questions about Christianity. Of course, they were pagan, and the Christian missionaries came in the 1800s and converted everybody there to Christianity. And he started asking questions, and these questions are going to come up now in pretty much every community that we talk about. First of all, most of them never read, at least in these early years, they never read the Old Testament. They only ever read the New Testament if they could read, okay? And Kakangulu then reads the Old Testament. He was an educated man, and he says, wait a minute, if Jesus kept the Sabbath, and Jesus kept kosher, and Jesus did circumcision, I don't understand. Why don't we do that? And he started reading the Old Testament, and at some point he found out there's a group called Jews. And he said, okay, I'm Jewish. And he did circumcision for 3,000 of the men in his tribe. And since 1919, they've been Jewish. Okay, now maybe not Jewish in terms of Jewish law, legally, halachically, but as far as they're concerned, they're Jewish. And listen to this. In 1976, when the Entebbe hijacking occurred and the Israelis were taken to Entebbe, and there were 100 and some odd people and so on. And of course, the famous Israeli rescue where they flew in the middle of the night, landed and saved everyone. And that's when Yonatan Netanyahu, Bibi's brother, was killed in that rescue attempt. So Idi Amin then kicked every Jew and Israeli out of the country. And when he heard that there's a tribe that calls themselves Jewish, he tried to kill some of them. So they had to go in hiding. So now you have, for almost 100 years, 99 years, 100 years this coming year, a tribe that has been practicing Judaism, learning as they've gone along. And now there's even a conservative rabbi from their group who went through the conservative yeshiva who runs a community. And there's even an Orthodox community. And none of them are, at least from an Orthodox perspective, halachically Jewish. Presently, there's one boy learning in the yeshiva in Efrat. There's somebody learning in Pardes in Jerusalem. Yesterday arrived in Israel 2 people from Zimbabwe. We'll discuss that. And you mentioned the Bana Israel, these Muslims in Afghanistan and northern India. Actually, the Taliban come from them. 2 of them have applied to come to Israel to spend a month in yeshiva to understand their Jewish roots. Wow. It's a crazy thing going on in this world. Okay, so this is our second group. Okay, we're talking about the Abu Yadaya. Let's go further west. On the western coast of Africa, there are numerous countries where you have this thing going on. In Ghana, you have a group of people that have converted conservatively, some of them Orthodox. And the most fascinating and amazing one is in Nigeria. Presently, as you and I are speaking, there are about 70 Sabbath observant synagogues with people that read Hebrew, that sing in Hebrew, that study Jewish law in the country of Nigeria. Okay, how did this happen? Well, there are 2 factors in Nigeria. The king of the southern part of Nigeria, or a particular area, about 30 million people in a tribe called the Igbo. The king's family name is Eri. Eri was the grandson of Shevet of the tribe of Gad. So if you look in Genesis, you'll see that the grandson of the son of God, G-A-D, not G-O-D, okay? The son of the tribe of God, his name is Eri. The family name of this royal family is Eri, and they claim, and all of the people, the Igbos in this tribe, 30 million, claim to be Jewish. Now, whether or not they believe in Christianity doesn't matter, but walking down the street wearing a kippah, a head covering, people would come up to me and say, "Are you Jewish?" And I'd say, "Yeah." And they'd say, "So am I." Now, there's no contradiction between the fact that they're wearing a cross or not. In their head, they're Jewish. I went to meet the king, literally met the king, and I was in his throne room, and there are pictures there of him wearing a talit, a prayer shawl, and a talit katan, and he wears a Magen David, a Star of David with the Lions of Judah. Okay, so it's a crazy situation, and it's a very religious country. The south is Christian and the north is Muslim, right? Boko Haram, all those girls that were kidnapped. Okay, that's the north of the country, and again, they were Christian and they were converted in the 1600s. There's even some sort of a letter that goes back to the 16 or 1700s that was written by Spanish or Portuguese travelers and sent back supposedly to Rome, describing a tribe that has Jewish customs, whatever that means, okay? And in fact, there's a book that I read that was written in the 1906 or something called Hebrewisms of West Africa. People that found. Now, what does it mean? It means that maybe this tribe did circumcision. Well, lots of people do circumcision, or very often they'll find things like observing certain separations between men and women when the woman has her period. Okay.
Do they not eat pork or things like that?
So I think that they don't eat pork. I'm not sure about that, but that's not uncommon for certain Christian communities. For example, in Ethiopia, there are 80 million people in Ethiopia, not the Jewish group, and there's 7,000 of them left in Ethiopia, and none of these religious Ethiopians eat pork because they have a much more Old Testament sort of religion. It's a very early branch of Christianity.
And how about keeping the biblical festivals? You mentioned Hanukkah, so that's not a biblical festival, but Passover or Sukkot.
In Ethiopia, they don't have that. They have something called Pascha, which is Easter, okay? But they have it's the same word. But in Nigeria, again, you have this continuum of Catholics, non-Catholics, and then you have what they call Sabbatarians, okay, who keep the Sabbath however they understand that, but on Saturday they keep the Sabbath, not on Sunday. You ready for this? It's the craziest thing in the world. I've traveled to 50 countries around the world or more looking for these Jewish groups and Jewish communities, and other than Western countries, I've never found kosher wine. Manischewitz sells their sacramental wine in Nigeria by the millions of bottles. Okay? I could find kosher wine in Nigeria. I found Manischewitz in Nigeria.
Wow, that's insane. So I just want to bump into this since you gave me the opening. You've traveled to 50 different countries. Now, in between all your traveling, you're a dentist in Jerusalem. So can you tell my listeners a little bit what bug bit you and when and how it is that you are considered one of the experts, I would say, in the world right now on all this I'm sitting in a room here, which my listeners can't see. It's a museum of things that you have collected, 500-year-old books, book you just found in Hebrew that you found in Afghanistan, Uzbekistan. So I think your hobby is being a dentist and your real passion is this. A little bit of what got you into this at all?
I grew up in the American Army. My dad was a rabbi in the American Army, so we moved all over the world. My family, my mother's side is after the Holocaust, they went everywhere: South Africa, South America, Europe, Sweden, and Switzerland and England. So I traveled a lot as a kid. Well, many people probably travel a lot as a kid. I also studied to be a shochet, a ritual slaughterer, and I do circumcision. And what happened? We
won't make the connection there. Let's just keep going.
Okay. And I was always interested in Jewish tradition and Jewish customs. And together with my research partner, we traveled. We've been traveling since we're 18-year-old kids, And first we traveled, let's say, to Russia during the days of the Soviet Union when the Jews were oppressed there. And actually, his name is also Ari. He and I, in the 80s, when the Jews were still oppressed and stuck in Ethiopia, we went to Ethiopia together. We were kids. We were about 22 years old. And ever since then, we've been traveling, and we always try and combine it with a professional trip. I'm going to a dental course in America, or I'm going to lecture. So we would stop off here and stop over there. And then people started hearing about us, and I started doing circumcision. So get a call to go to Sweden or to Croatia. And so this is how I started. And then Ari and I, my partner, we realized that there are many, many Jewish communities, or these non-Jewish communities, the ghost communities we'll call them, that have these ancient traditions, certainly the Jewish communities, and they're disappearing. So, for example, we just talked before about the story of Hanukkah that took place in 164. Do you remember where exactly Hannah and her sons were when they were told they have to eat the pig? In a city called Antiochia. Okay, so Antioch, where is it? It's in southern Turkey. So I was there 6 months ago because there's still a synagogue there, and there's less than 10 Jews left. There's one Jew there that still, as of last year, drives to Damascus to drop matzah off to the secret Jews in Damascus.
I don't know how many secret Jews there are left in Damascus after what's happening in Syria.
Okay, so my point is, though, that I was always interested in these Jewish traditions and customs, and one thing led to another, and this is how I ended up being involved in this whole business. Okay, let's just get back to the Igbo. So they moved from being Sabbatarians, and again, the same questions. Okay, we're reading now the Old Testament, but if Jesus kept the mitzvot, how come we don't keep the mitzvot? And then they start keeping the mitzvot, and then, but wait a minute, but it's the Jews that keep the mitzvot. So this is how this whole business happens. In some countries, they're exceedingly educated. So in Nigeria, the kids are very educated. They may not have money even to use the internet on their phone because they're very poor, but they've all had access and have access to the internet. And I think that's what's fueling this whole thing. That's what's fueling the Anusim, the Marranos, the people that are coming back from their secret, Jewish heritage after the Inquisition, because they have questions. They've seen their grandmother did something was weird, and they will go online and then they find it. Another man that I travel with actually wrote a book called "How to Know If You Have Jewish Roots." It's been translated now to 7 or 8 languages. You can find it on the internet. So this is what's going on. We met this man, this king, and we met these people. I spent a week there teaching from morning till evening in one community to the next. I have behind you, it's mind-boggling, there are 2 Jewish schools in Nigeria. Okay, what's a Jewish school? Officially sanctioned school, grade school, where the kids learn Judaism. They learn in Hebrew. It's like a little yeshiva. Okay,
they're not persecuted at all?
No. They're not persecuted. I mean, I'm sure that there are Christians that don't like the fact that Muslims are in the north of the country. There are no Muslims there. Okay, so So, for example, I have this. I'll show it to you afterwards, but it's hanging over there. It's kids wore these they all wear what do they call them, uniforms in school. There, it has a patch with a Torah, and it says Torah is wisdom. And this is what the kids have to do when they go to school and go to school. I have a video of them singing Hatikva. So now we've discussed 3 places. We've discussed Western Africa, Nigeria. We've discussed Uganda, Central Africa. We've discussed the Ethiopians. We can go to Zimbabwe.
What language do you speak to them in? Hebrew?
No, Nigerian I speak. No, I speak English. They speak English. Yeah. There are places where they don't speak English, but they were all at one point some sort of a Western colony. So, for example, in Madagascar, they speak French. So, either we had a translator or not. So in Madagascar, it's the same thing. There were 3 groups, very small groups. Madagascar, you ready for this? It's this island off the coast of Africa, off the eastern coast of Africa. In Madagascar, there's something called the Malagasy secret. Malagasy is their language, and the Malagasy is the people. What's the Malagasy secret? The whole island, so they claim to us, believes that they're from the 10 tribes. Okay, genetically they're not. We know where they come from. But one of the people who's now converted to Judaism in a conservative conversion pointed out a stand of trees, and he said, "You see those are cypress trees. They took the trees for the temple from this copse of trees, right?" And there are now three. So there are 3 groups of people there, and they also wanted to convert. They're all dying to convert Orthodox. I mean, we went and Dafka wanted to spend the Sabbath. I wanted to see how do they practice. I was interested. Now understand, I'm a religious Jewish person, and I don't know what your listeners know or don't know, but the Sabbath for us has great restrictions, and it's not easy. And of course, kosher food is a big issue. Well, for me, I can slaughter chickens, or a deer. It's not.
You're handy to have around. Yes.
But so to go to a place where there is not a traditional Orthodox Jewish community is not always easy. It's very difficult sometimes. But I've always found that the most meaningful Sabbaths of my life are in these places. Okay. We'll get to the most amazing story in a minute, okay? So that's the story of Madagascar. So let's go back to Zimbabwe. There's a group in Zimbabwe who claim Jewish descent. Now, what's it based upon? This is the most interesting thing. There is a gene or a portion of a gene that it appears in a high percentage of our priestly caste, the Kohanim. It's not with everybody. It's only a certain percentage, okay? So they claim, based upon a study or two, that their priestly caste, a very small percentage, has this gene, which is unique to these two groups. Is it true? Is it not true? There have been studies, yes. There have been studies, no. But it doesn't really matter. You have a very small community now in Zimbabwe of people that either claim to be Jewish, a handful have converted, or want to be Jewish and observe. And like I said to you just now, it's not always easy to get visas from these countries for people to come study in Israel. But just this week, 2 people arrived from Zimbabwe who will be studying in yeshiva.
Is there an organization that supports this? It can't be. It's not inexpensive to do what you're saying they're doing.
Right. So here's the way it works. There's one organization, and it's really sort of an umbrella organization, and it's non-denominational. It's called Kulanu. And Kulanu is, if you search these issues, you'll get to the Kulanu website. And Kulanu is an amazing organization, and they don't really care, who you are or where you come from. If you want to be associated with the Jewish people, and you're not a Christian group, right? Because they're interested in groups that want to be Jewish or claim to have Jewish descent, right? So if you're a Christian group, they're not really going to be involved with you, but they help and they raise money and they try and, for example, right now Kulanu is involved in setting up a computer system in Nigeria for some of these kids so that they can learn and they can, so that's one organization. There's an organization called Nidchei Yisrael by somebody named Michael Freund, who's done amazing work over the years. And Rabbi Birnbaum from Or Torah is now a little bit reaching out. So, there are people, there are very good people that want to do this. It's very complicated with the state of Israel, because the state of Israel, rightfully so, is hesitant to give visas to people that they're afraid are going to end up dumping their visa and just, disappearing into Israel. I mean, any country has these concerns. Just look what's going on in America now, right? So
or all over Europe. Any country has the right to say,
all over Europe,
we can't just let you in.
Right, and especially since we had so many of these, legal immigrants that came here many years ago. There are social issues, but it's complicated because on the one hand, you have people that are so devoted to the Jewish people and so want to be Jewish and have been practicing Judaism, have been suffered because they're Jewish. And then you have the state of Israel, or certain factions within the state of Israel, of course, who make it difficult. It's not always so easy.
I listen to you and I think about how many Jews from where we come from in North America, where it's so easy to be Jewish, who I wouldn't put money on their grandchildren being Jewish now. Right. Like, it just doesn't interest them. And then here you're talking about people who are doing whatever they can to join the Jewish people. But the question that really just pops in my mind, haven't they heard of anti-Semitism? Like, haven't they heard that being Jewish is not only not so simple, but we get persecuted all the time. Like, is it now cool to be Jewish, or what's happening?
It was always cool to be Jewish.
Well, I thought so, yeah.
Okay, so you raise a very interesting point. In the time of the First Temple period, or just after the First Temple, during the period of the First Temple, there were people in the land of Israel that wanted to convert, and the Talmud refers to them as to Judaism, and the Talmud refers to them as Gerei Arayot, the people who converted because of lions. Okay, what's the story? I think it's mentioned. It's mentioned in the Tanakh, where there was a plague of lions and they were killing the people, and for whatever reason the Jews were protected. Okay, whatever the story is, and these people sought protection amongst the Jews, and the rabbis 1,000 years later were use that as an example of an imperfect conversion. They converted for a reason. They wouldn't necessarily believe in Judaism, but they saw, okay, it's good to be Jewish.
Well, it was also a national thing in the sense of you lived in a country, so you adopted the god of that country. It was very, very different 2,700 years ago.
But nonetheless, this concept of conversion for the sake of something, or to better yourself because the Jewish people are in a strong position, was discussed already 2,000 years ago by the rabbis in the Talmud. In the last 2,000 years, I don't think there's ever been a period where the Jewish people were in a strong and good position. It hasn't happened. Only now with the state of Israel, okay, which raises profound questions about people in these oppressed countries where life is terrible and where they sometimes don't have money for food, and all of a sudden now they want to be Jewish. So, what is their motivation? So from what I've seen, the vast majority of the people that I've met, their motivation is not that, especially when they say that, they're not interested in leaving their country. That's a pretty good sign. But anti-Semitism, as you know it, and as probably your people know it, is a European and American, and it's a Catholic thing, okay? It's a Western European, Eastern European also, and North American, South American issue. In Asia, there's no such thing as anti-Semitism.
India.
In India, and is non-existent, of course, in India. In China, they don't know what it is. I was
Buddhist anti-Semitism.
not that I know of. Okay, I was on the way to Papua New Guinea, which we'll save for the end of our discussion. And I'm in Philippines, and I see a guy in the airport, a local guy wearing a baseball cap with a star, the flag of Israel on it. So I went up to him and I said, and the flag of Israel and the flag of the Philippines. I said to him, what's going on? He says, oh, we love the Jews, we love Israel. Okay, it's so fascinating to me. We, by virtue of the fact we're speaking English now, have a Western perspective. But there are a lot more people in the world than the West. And there are many places in the rest of the world where they love us. It's hard for us to imagine because you've never experienced this. But when you go places, and I go and I wear a kippah almost wherever I go, if not, I'm wearing a baseball cap. But you can't imagine when people come up to you and start having a discussion with you, understand that they love Israel. They're proud of Israel. They think Israel's amazing, and I think that's a different perspective. So
there's Catholic anti-Semitism, and now we have Muslim, for whatever reasons, political and religious. Now, sadly,
correct.
That's also against the Jews.
So of course that's why I didn't mention the Muslim world. I mentioned Asia, but even the Muslim world. I was in Kurdistan, which is northern Iraq, and I was there for 3 days with two other people, and we had high connections there, and we were the first ever official Jewish delegation. Now, has the Israeli Secret Service been there? Yeah. Have there been over the many years, Israeli, no, not businessmen. There's very little business.
I know a lawyer who actually was doing some business in Kurdistan for a while.
So in any event, though, but no one ever went with a kippah to research the Jewish roots as a proud Jew. So we were there. I walked into a hotel wearing my kippah. Okay, now I was with local people. 2 thumbs up. Okay, another fellow in the airport saw me and says, "Oh, we love you guys." Okay, it's funny. I was just in Kyrgyzstan, a Muslim country. They like Israel.
Wow.
Okay, they're Muslim light. Let's use that word.
Right. Well, only 17% of Muslims are Arabs. So if you want to turn this into a territorial or political thing, then it's the minority. But it's a lot more complicated.
It's much more complicated than that. In Boko Haram and all of North Africa, they're not Arabs, but they'd like to kill me right now.
You wanted to talk about the Shabbat, the most amazing Shabbat that you spent.
The most amazing Shabbat of my life, I think. Okay? If you go on the internet, go onto Google, and you type in the following word, type in Papua New Guinea Jewish. You'll come to a video of a bunch of natives with spears, with war paint, with grass skirts, saying in Hebrew the Shema and singing it. And then they say the second line of the Shema. And then they start reciting the Shema. And the first time I saw it, I was flabbergasted. I couldn't imagine that such a thing existed. And I couldn't find anything about it. I didn't know anything about it. And I spoke to some people in Kulanu that explained to me, deep in the jungles of Papua New Guinea is a tribe called the Gangadola that also claimed to be from the 10 tribes. And I said, I have to go visit this place. Now, you have to understand, deep in the jungle until today in Papua New Guinea, there are still people who, I say it in English.
Cannibals?
Cannibals, yes. There are still stories of cannibals, okay? Cannibalism was only outlawed about 70 years ago, okay? So we're talking about not the most developed country in the world, maybe one of the most least developed countries in the world. It took 40 hours to get there. We had made a contact before with the head of the tribe who lives in the capital, doesn't live in the countryside with the tribe. And from the 40 hours, we then took a small plane for 5 hours, stopping on grass runways. And we arrived finally at the last stop to have a group of about 20 people with flags of Israel, wearing traditional Jewish head coverings, blowing shofars, wearing talitot and tchelet and tzitzit, the strings on the corner of their garments, okay? They put us into dugout canoes, and we went for an hour upriver. The river has crocodiles in it, whatever. It's the real McCoy. They still hunt with bows and arrows. You can see one of the bows and arrows in the back of this room that they hunt with, okay? We arrived, and we were taken to this building without walls, a big building. There were hundreds and hundreds of people waiting for us with Magen Davids and wearing head coverings, kippot and talitot and tzitziot, and they're singing Hebrew songs. And then they sang there on a bamboo poles. They made flag poles, and they sang the Papua New Guinean anthem. And they then sang Hatikva, and they raised this flag and that flag. Okay?
Who taught them all this? Who brought them the tchelet?
Internet. The tchelet is actually not the tchelet that I'm involved with, right? I'm involved with Emmanuel. No, it's probably indigo, but if you go onto eBay, you'll see that there are people that sell tchelet, and it's marketed to the Christian community. Mm-hmm. So it's, but in any event, so we were there, and we spoke, and we gave classes. And now, understand, there's only 2 flights a week to get up there. One that goes up Wednesday and goes down Wednesday, and one that goes up Friday from the capital and goes down on Friday. And we're there, and then I said to the guy, it must have been amazing when you were a kid. He says, yeah, we used to go into the jungle. We would hunt. I said, like, what did you hunt? He says, we would hunt for alligators. I said, how did you get alligators? Listen to this. Evidently, he said, the alligators don't open their mouths underwater because they need to breathe or something like this. So he says, they wait till midday when the sun's above. They go where they can see down underwater, and they see an alligator on the bottom of the water, and 2 people swim underwater. One puts a slipknot over his tail, and one puts a slipknot over his snout, and they yank on the thing, and they pull it up. Okay, fine.
They must have really nice shoes and belts, all of them, just saying.
They don't wear shoes, and they don't wear belts. Okay. So, and then what happens is, so he said, yeah, whatever. And he said, we used to hunt deer. I said, really? Deer? He says, yeah, deer. So I said, is it possible to catch them without killing them? He says, yeah, it can be done. I said, you think we could catch one and we could have dinner? So he got all excited because they wanted to see what a kosher slaughter was. And I brought my slaughtering knives with me. I mean, if you don't bring your shechita knives to Papua New Guinea, where do you bring them? Exactly. You understand?
That was my next question.
It's a very obvious thing. Right. So they brought this deer, and we slaughtered the deer, and they made a fire. Now, we can't eat on their plates, right? Of course, we can't use their utensils. So what did we do? Experience from other parts of the world. Banana leaves make spectacular plates. They took their machetes and fashioned from bamboo sharp knives and sharp forks for us. It was unbelievable. And they cooked over a bamboo. They made a bamboo grate. Wow. Okay, now all of this is fantastic. And we spent many hours with them. And this is now Wednesday night. And they say to us, Wednesday night, there's a problem. The Friday flight has been canceled. Okay, now I am not going to spend the Sabbath in the jungle. After all, I don't want to become the Sabbath food, okay? I don't want to be cholent. So I said, we can't stay here. We have to find a solution. So I said, what about on the river? Can we take the river? And he says, yeah, okay. They did some thinking. 6 hours down the river, they said, is an island. And on Friday morning, there's a flight, 2 flights, one at 11:30 and one at 3 in the afternoon. Okay, fine. But I see they're really hesitating, okay? And as opposed to when we came up the river, they pack us into the boat, metal boat, no chairs, hard floor, nothing. You can't imagine, okay, the details and discomfort. And they put on us life vests, and they're lashing everything down. And, I didn't understand, like what? It's a pretty calm river. Okay. We start going. 4 hours comes and go, 6 hours comes and go, 12 hours comes and go, and it now gets dark. And we're in the middle of the river, and we're nowhere near this island. And I see, there are all sorts of branches, and they're coming in from here and going out from there, and I see they're a little bit lost, and it's pitch black. There's no electricity anywhere. And we're now very uncomfortable. We've been sitting in this metal boat for 12 hours. We saw a light twinkling in the distance, and we came to a fishing village in the middle of the jungle. And there was the Chinese have gone into the jungle and they brought a generator and they freeze the fish in the middle of the jungle. Okay, so we found a wood floor that we could sleep on, and this river, at the mouth of the river, it attaches to the open ocean. So
Which ocean is this?
Which ocean is probably part of the Pacific Ocean. I mean, because the island, it's an island in the middle of the Pacific. I don't know the exact ocean, but and as a result, also because there are tides, and this river is attached to the ocean, so the tide came in many, many hundreds of kilometers up the river, and the river rose 4 or 5 feet.
Wow.
Okay. Anyway, we get up early in the morning. Now it's Friday, and we want to get back. We have to get to this island. How many hours away is it? They say 3 hours away. So I said, okay, we woke up at 5. I said, let's go. No, we can't go now. The tide's out. Okay. We have to go through a channel. Okay. And so I said to them, I said, what's the name of the channel? They said, it's called the Parsha channel. So I'm thinking, the Parsha of the week. We got to go through the Torah reading of the week. Okay. It's full of mud at this time of year. So we had to wait for the tide to come in so we could go through this channel. We end up in the open ocean with very big waves, and we're getting tossed around. Now I understand what's going on. It took us many hours to get to the island. We get to the island just a half an hour before the plane, and we come to the airport, and now it's 24 hours have gone by, okay? More. We come to the airport, we see the first plane leaving. No big deal. There's a 3 o'clock plane. 3 o'clock comes. There's no plane. Now, understand, we had nothing with us. We had left all of our food, all of our clothing, everything back in the capital. When we flew up, we took a backpack. And we have no food left. We had one little can of stuffed olive leaves. We had clothing was literally, I threw my pants out. They were destroyed. We were wet. We were cold. Were
you scared?
No, I wasn't. But one of the guys with us was a little nervous. But yeah, okay. And of course, we were ignorant, so we didn't know to be scared.
You were too stupid to be scared at this point. Right.
Like, for example, it told us afterwards in the fishing village that our boat guys posted a guard outside because very possibly we could have been attacked or robbed. No, it wouldn't have been that. But for example, the capital is one of the most dangerous places in the world. You don't stop at a traffic light in the capital.
What's the name of that?
Port Moresby. So it was a very important city in World War II because MacArthur made his headquarters there as he conquered the Pacific back for the Allied forces. Okay, so we're now on this island. We're calling. The plane is coming from the capital, and it's only an hour flight away. No big deal. It's still 3:30. Shabbat is about 6:30, and we call. Is it coming? Yeah, it's coming. Okay, so it'll get to us at 4:30. We'll be back by 5:30. Anyway, at 4 o'clock, they tell us the plane's been canceled. Okay, so now we're in the middle of nowhere. We're on an island in the middle of nowhere with no kosher food, no place to stay. Shabbat.
How many of you are there?
3 of us, and the head of the tribe, a wonderful guy. And the story, you'll understand in a minute why the story is just amazing. Okay, we found a guest house on the island, which is basically a building with some rooms, Chinese, okay? And the Chinese actually they're so smart, they've gone to the end of the trail as far as you can go, and they'll open up like a supermarket, like the Jews did in South Africa and in the United States in the 1800s, same thing. And normally it's no big deal. You go into the kitchen of any hotel or any place, you give a few dollars to the guy, and you say, we need, do us a favor, cook us this, we need to put some vegetables, double wrap it in foil, put it in the oven, and everything's fine. The chef here was one mean guy, didn't speak any English, didn't want to see us. So we managed to find some fresh bread. We bought some cans of sardines and there was some kosher chocolate we found there, and we even wanted to make kiddush, the next day on beer. The elections were going on, and because it gets so violent, there's no alcohol being sold even. Okay. Fine, everything's cool. We had
no Manischewitz in this particular island.
No Manischewitz here, and we're sitting there Friday night, davening, praying the Friday night prayers, overlooking the ocean, and it's like inland, so you don't see the open ocean, and we see these dugout canoes that are like pontoon boats, right? They're sticking off, and families live in them. They live in the boats. They never live on land. They live on the boats, okay? And the tide had gone out, and it's just one huge plain of mud, and we're watching them, and we're davening and praying, and it was in the sun setting.
Surreal.
It was surreal. Okay, now here's where it gets surreal. The fellow who was with us from the head of the tribe says to us Friday night, he says, there's some people here from my tribe that live on this island, and they're from the part of the tribe that are the Sabbath observers, meaning Ke'ilu, the Jewish portion of the tribe. So we got to meet them. So we made arrangements, and a Saturday afternoon, Shabbat in the afternoon, towards Mincha, the afternoon prayer time, we arrive at this house, okay? There are people wearing prayer shawls, kippot, head coverings. The Shema in Hebrew is written on the wall, Star of David, flag of Israel. In the middle of nowhere, And when I saw that, I said to myself, how many other places are there in this world that we have not a clue about? Okay, and if that wasn't absurd enough, okay, there's a flight Sunday morning, 11 o'clock. Yeah, we had a wonderful Shabbat and Saturday night. And can you imagine being in a place with no internet? We can't even imagine what that is today. Okay, there's no internet. 7 in the morning, I went outside around the hotel, the motel, whatever it was. There was like a market. And for those of you who have never been to a market in a third world country, a market means, a woman puts a little plastic bag on the ground and she's selling 4 oranges, right. Or there's fresh meat. Somebody killed a wild pig or whatever it is. Okay.
Very ad hoc.
Very, very ad hoc. Okay. And I'm the only white person, so I'm a real curiosity. And I had a drone that I brought along to take air pictures. So I put the drone up. They've, of course, never seen a drone. And we have 100 people in this market looking at the drone and running after it. And all of a sudden, a Jeep comes careening into the middle of the people, squeals to a stop, and the head military guy gets out. And he's cursing and angrily screaming, "Is that a drone? It's against the law." He says, "This is a very strategic spot." And he points to the south and he says, 2,000 kilometers away is Australia. And he points to the north. 1,000 kilometers away is Indonesia. This is very strategic. And he proceeds to arrest me.
No. He arrested you?
Well, I've been arrested in many countries, many places, okay, but he arrests me because of the drone. And he arrests Rabbi Birnbaum, okay? And everyone's trying to calm him down, and he's screaming and cursing. And
now, who controls the island now? Forgive my ignorance.
It's the country of Papua New Guinea. Okay.
It's a communist, no, just a regular country. Elections, everything.
There are elections.
Oh, right. You said that's why there's no alcohol. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how democratic it really is. But
yeah. Okay.
They have open, free elections, and yeah.
Okay.
Well, military, strong military. Anyway, they're trying to calm him down, and I said to him, maybe let's go back to the hotel. And he screams at me, "No, you're going to the jail." Okay, he puts us in the truck, and he starts driving, and already I guess people were trying to calm him down. Okay, he takes us to the hotel. We go upstairs, we order a coffee, and he's really quite not friendly, very mean. And okay, he starts calming down, and I pointed to my friend with the beard. I said, "Do you know who this man is?" And he spoke English, and he says, "No." I said, "He's the chief rabbi of the state of Israel." Yeah, okay. Anyway, he comes down, and he realizes that
he didn't have internet, so he couldn't check.
He couldn't check, right? He realizes that we're not spies, that we're a bunch of jokers. And then we started talking about Israel, and of course, he has great admiration for the state of Israel. And all I'm thinking about is, oh my God, I got to get to this plane at 11 o'clock, okay? And it's now been days that we've been in the jungle with nothing. So I decided I have to bribe him, okay? So I said to him, "Can we go into the office and talk for a minute or two?" Fine. He gets up and comes to me. Now, I don't know how many people you've ever had to bribe, okay?
Fortunately, not too many.
Thank
yeah.
God, we live in places where we don't need to do that. So when you bribe a person, from experience, okay, it can go well or it can go bad. Okay, so I go into the room, we start talking, and I took out a $100 bill. And he started getting really hot. He said, "No, what are you doing? I can't take it." He was like, and I'm thinking, oh my God, now it's going to get worse. And I don't know, God put the following words in my mouth. I said, "No, you misunderstand. It's not for you. I said, our boys in Israel, when we send them to the army, we always buy them warmer clothing and better socks and better shoes. These are for your guys, for your boys. Oh my God. And that was it. He put us in his truck. He took us to the airport. He put us at the front of the line. And that was the most amazing Shabbat of my life. Yeah, that was amazing.
When was this?
About 2 years ago. About 2 years ago, yeah.
Do you film? Are you going to come out with something here at some point?
We film. The last few years, it's a shame we didn't, for so many years, didn't film. We should have. We didn't. But the last few years we've been filming. We have a website called Halachic Adventures, HALACHIC, Adventures, all right, .com. And there you can find maybe 100 articles with pictures of all of these places and the places we've been and so on.
Did you ever take people that, not just the 2 or 3 of you, but if somebody wants to go on a halachic adventure with you, can they do so?
Usually not, for many reasons. We've taken over the years occasionally of people. We're there, as crazy as it sounds, for serious work. And from the minute we get up in the morning to the minute we go to sleep, which could be 18 hours, we're running from here. We're interviewing that. We got to meet this old woman who claims to be a descendant of this one. Twice I've taken tours. I just asked to take a tour to Africa. And I didn't enjoy it, because when you take a tour, a tour is a tour. They want to have food, and they want to have the food ready. And what happens when the food isn't up to their standard?
I'm quite familiar with that, right?
Okay, and then you're stuck in Africa, and how do you make sure the food's kosher? So, yeah, I've done it twice, but no, I don't think I can't see it so much.
Right. So where's your next adventure? Where are there Jews that you think there might be Jews and you haven't been there yet? Anything in the deepest regions of, New Zealand or in the middle of Australia? Or where haven't you gone?
There's still places in Africa that I haven't gone. There are places in Asia that I would like to go. I was recently in Korea. Okay, they say the word is that 2 million Koreans learn the Talmud. Have you heard this?
Yes, I have.
Okay, and I said to myself, this cannot be real. There aren't 2 million Jews that learn the Talmud. And even the Jews that are smart and know how to learn the Talmud, it's very hard to understand. I said, I have to see what's going on. People used to say to me, they learn the Talmud. It's a really big deal there. So I was brought to Japan to do a bris, a circumcision. And on the way back, I flew via Korea. And I met the 2 guys that learned the Talmud in Korea. But the story's crazy. You ready for this? In the 1960s, there was a rabbi in Japan. And he wrote a book about Judaism. He may have titled it The Talmud. I don't know if he did or didn't. And it was the first book in Japanese that they could read. It made its way to South Korea, and somebody translated it into Korean and gave it the name The Talmud. And hold on, I just got to show you this. I know your readers can't see it.
Right, my listeners, yes.
It is the Talmud in Korean.
Oh, my goodness, guys. Maybe I'll take a picture of this, and that'll be the...
Even. It's crazy, right? Okay, so what happened was this book about Judaism came out. Now, in South Korea, they happen to love Israel. And they say the Jews are very smart and all Jews are rich, as we know, right? So what is the success? What's the reason the Jews are so successful? Must be the Talmud. It must be the Talmudic thinking, the thought process, and how to understand these complicated Talmudic passages and so on. So, and more than that, how do we study the Talmud? There's a concept called chevruta, where you have a study partner. And these men said, you know what? It must be the study partner, the process of studying the Talmud. This might be the way that the Jews are. So, everyone thinks all Jews are rich, and you and I know that the vast majority are not. Okay, but so they decided to start an institute called the Chevruta Institute, where they teach the concept of joint partner learning to general secular schools. And they've taught 10,000 people. Anyway, he says, but everyone's read the Talmud. Okay, what does he mean by the Talmud? He means the book written by Rabbi Tokayer. I was deep in the countryside trying to find a boy who was an orphan in the 50s when my uncle was a soldier there. Long story. And we stopped by the outside of this church, and 2 or 3 people came out, and there's a woman in her 30s. And I just said to her through the translator, do you know what the Talmud is? She says, yeah, I read it when I was 18. Okay, so, that's it. Where am I going? I'm on the way back to Ethiopia probably in February. I'm actually trying to set up a circumcision school in Ethiopia. And there, maybe to India again. There's amazing stuff going on in India, but that's for another time.
Anything in Egypt by any chance?
Yeah, I've been to Egypt. There's probably less than 20 Jews left in Egypt.
Really?
There are a number of synagogues. There's a spectacular synagogue in Alexandria that once was the biggest synagogue. I'll tell you a story in Alexandria. Okay, I'm in Alexandria, and then there were about 20 Jews in Alexandria, mostly women, old women, because the men died, right? And we're in the synagogue, and there's a younger guy. Then he was probably in his 40s, one of the very few Jewish men that still live there, and he was by the government placed in charge of the Jewish community and the synagogue and everything there. And he gets a phone call, and he's speaking in French. And he said to me, he hung up. He says, "This is an amazing story." He says, "I just speaking to a woman in her 80s. When she was 12 years old, she was kidnapped by a Muslim. And the law in Muslim countries is if you kidnap a Jewish person, or anybody really, but you have the right to take her as a wife. In fact, that's one of the reasons why the Ethiopian Jews would get married at 9, 10, 11, 12. They didn't consummate the marriage, right? But if you were married, you couldn't be kidnapped. Mm-hmm. Okay? So he says she was kidnapped. She grew up her whole life as pretended to be a Muslim. Her husband knew she was Jewish, but she was Muslim as far as anyone was concerned. Her kids don't know that she's Jewish. Her husband
and that they're Jewish.
And that they're Jewish, right? Her husband had just died, and she shows up at the synagogue for Passover. She wants to get matzah. Wow. So I called her, and I said, "I got to meet you." She says, "I'm too old. I can't walk. I can't come to the synagogue anymore." So I said, "So we'll come to your house." She says, "No." And she says, "We live in this very religious Muslim Brotherhood community. Any foreigner that comes in sticks out like a sore thumb." But can you imagine the stories this woman must have to tell? And I've met people like this elsewhere in the world too.
Wow.
So
absolutely fascinating. And you're doing work that, it's not even work, but
it's fun, it's play. You asked me how I work as a dentist.
Yeah.
So I always say God gave me 25 hours a day, right? You know, Rabbi Riskin, I don't know if your viewers know Rabbi Riskin. Rabbi Riskin used to sleep 3-4 hours a day, a night, 4 hours a night, whatever. But the difference between him and us is that he continued to study and learn for those extra 3 hours that he was awake, that most of us are asleep. So I did the math. Just think about it. He has an extra 21 hours a week. He has an extra day a week. That's an extra 4 days a month. That's an extra 50 days a year. So somehow God gave me this extra hour a day. And that, thank God, allows me to try and do these good deeds.
Okay. Ari Greenspan, definitely going to talk to you again, because you just have, my listeners don't even know about Italy and matzah cutters and things that you've been collecting over all the years. So we'll definitely circle back to you. I thank you so much. This has been just fascinating. And film and put out a film, so that, because once these people die, that's it. All these stories are going to die with them.
In the last 5 years or 10 years, we've started doing that. But you know, there weren't cell phones so many years ago. Remember, there was big video cameras, so it wasn't always so easy. But
okay, so much more to talk about. All right, thank you everybody for listening. Dr. Ari Greenspan, and adventures from everywhere, halachic adventures. Eve Harrow, Rejuvenation on the Land of Israel Network. Thanks to Ben and Tabitha and everybody else. Hope you enjoyed this one, guys. Take care. Goodbye for now.
You're listening to the Land of Israel Network at the Land of